A baby has just been born in this hut behind me. It is one of the loveliest experiences in the life of any young woman. All young maidens dream of the day when they will become mothers. Of course, this has been part of their upbringing. Not only have they been little nursemaids themselves, but in the initiation lodges they've been taught about pregnancy, about childbirth and motherhood. And if they have any fears at all, it is the fear of being barren one day. From the moment it is known that a woman has become pregnant, she gains an extra measure of status in the eyes not only of the other women around her, but also in the eyes of her husband. At the time of birth, the mother is attended to by hand-picked midwives who are usually highly experienced people. She is also kept in seclusion until roughly such time as the umbilical cord comes away. And during this time, she is continuously chaperoned. Not even her own husband may see her alone. Now, during this period of seclusion, both mother and child receive purifactory treatment. They are given protective medicines, and the baby wears amulets around wrists, around ankles, around the neck, and not infrequently, medicine is daubed into the cranium to ward off insidious influences. Then comes a day when both mother and child emerge from the hut and join the rest of the village. And on this day, the name of the baby is announced. And usually this stems from something important that happened on that day. For example, if it had been a misty day, then the baby could be called Makungu the Mist. If it had been a baby long waited for, it could be called Lindiwe, the one awaited. And if the parents were middle-aged and the baby was a bit of a surprise, it could be called Sipo, the gift. In Mozambique, there's a kraal where a baby was named Peter Becker Mashaba. And this came about because I happened to arrive in that kraal at the very moment it was born. Now, what about the environment in which a baby grows up? Well, first of all, this hut belongs to a headman. And in the background, we see other huts which belong to his wives, and even more that belong to his adolescent children, both male and female. Children get to know this beautiful tree in the background because here very important meetings are held from time to time. They spend a lot of time at the cattle fold because there too many activities take place. And here on my left is the granary. This they get to know intimately because their parents are forever sending them to the granary to fetch grain to the huts. But I think I must explain that in tribal South Africa, crawls differ from place to place. Let's take the Zulu one, for example. Now, the Zulu crawls are scattered over the hills and in the valleys and are invariably small, unless, of course, they belong to headmen or chiefs. Huts are built around the central cattle fold, and the entire settlement is encircled by a thorn bush hedge or by a hedge made out of whatever material is most readily available in the environment. In Ovambo land, crawls are far larger and are subdivided into many sections. For example, there's the one section where the chief or crawl head or patriarch lives and entertains his friends. There's another where his wives live, the other where his children live and are segregated according to age and sex. And then one has the section where cooking is done and where food is stored. And there's the meeting place, and that one small but very important section where the sacred fire is kept perpetually alight.
Tribal man builds his home according to his surroundings. This long passageway connecting the various living, cooking and storage areas of a chief's kraal in Leboa is a good example of the way a large family or community fashions a world that is orderly and self-contained. Settlements are usually built in areas where nature provides the essential needs for living. People gather together where they have access to fresh water and where the surrounding countryside supports crops and provides grazing for animals. The size of the settlement and the number of its inhabitants is directly influenced by the immediate environment. Bricks are produced by various methods and are made from locally available clay or mud mixed with straw, but the methods used do vary.
Hey!
Decorations on floors and walls vary from tribe to tribe, and in some cases, the designs are known to have subtle meanings. They may relate to the social status or the importance of a man inhabiting the dwelling, and in rare occasions, they may even reflect his spiritual leanings. In rugged territory such as this, settlements tone harmoniously with the surroundings. The dry heat and the stark lines of the courtyards complement each other. Settlements are large, so that the local population can make use of communal water and other resources. The material used for building cattle kraals is largely dependent upon the environment. In the northern Transvaal, among the Pedi people, the majority of kraals are built of stone, skillfully packed one on top of the other. This is simply because in this part of the country, there are large quantities of stones of this size and shape almost everywhere.
In areas where stone is not available, kraals and animal pens are constructed from a wide variety of other locally available raw materials.
Man has learned to cope with his environment and to use nature to his advantage. The world of tribal man is one that reflects an affinity with nature, and the harmony is often manifested in scenes of extreme beauty. In easterly regions where the soil is fertile and the water plentiful, settlements tend to be small and widely scattered. The kraals in the Western Transvaal and Botswana assume a different dimension, because in those parts literally thousands of families are positioned side by side to form a mammoth village extending over many kilometers. Now one can imagine some of the problems in a village such as this. For example, all the people couldn't possibly keep their cattle together in one central spot. And so there are cattle posts as remote as 50, 60, or even 80 kilometers from the central village. Another great problem is posed by the cultivated fields. Only the very highly privileged people have their fields nearby, but the younger people have fields as remote as 200 kilometers from the central village. So therefore, when the first spring rains come, a great exodus takes place from the main village to all these outposts. And the people go out and they start tilling the soil and planting and weeding. And then when the autumn comes and the reaping is done and the harvests have been gathered, they migrate back to the central village and enjoy a winter in comparative leisure. The patriarch of this village is married to 5 wives, and these are their huts in order of seniority. The first wife is senior to the second, and the second to the third. And the least important of all is the wife he married last. Her hut is right down at the very bottom. Now, because a man is polygamous does not necessarily mean that he should be economically under any great pressure, because tradition demands that a woman should be self-sufficient. Polygamy is on the wane in southern Africa, and yet when I think to all these places I've been, There are a few friends of mine who are married to more than 20 wives, and they have over 80 children each, which makes me think of an anecdote concerning old Moshesh, the founder of the Basotho nation. He had 43 wives, by the way. Now, one day he went down to a spring to have a drink of water, and there he saw a beautiful damsel, and he said to her, "By the way, what is the name of your husband?" And she said to him, "The name of my husband is Moshesh. In fact, you are my husband." The tribal groups inhabiting the east coast regions of southern Africa are collectively known as Nguni. Individuals who claim to be descended from a common ancestor are intimately bonded in clanship, even though they may be scattered, living far apart over vast stretches of territory. When fellow clansmen meet, sometimes as total strangers, they extend to each other an uncommon warmth of hospitality. And in times of trouble, they feel in honor bound to stand by each other in the name of the ancestral founder of the clan. The Sotho-speaking peoples of the northern and western Transvaal, the Orange Free State, the Lesotho and Botswana are similarly bonded, except they identify themselves by way of totems. In fact, right here in Molechi, which is to the north of Pietersburg, the dominant totem is the crocodile, and one hears people greeting each other with "Dumela kwena," which means "Hello, crocodile." Within these Sotho-speaking groups, there are numerous totems. For example, there's the Batlokwa, or wildcat people, the Bapiri, the hyena people, the Bataung, the lion people, and the Bakhatla, the monkey people. In former times, people would not have killed or eaten or even touched their various totems for fear of being punished by supernatural means. Attitudes such as this have changed today, have mellowed, except that this feeling of togetherness is as strong as ever before by virtue of the various totems.
But in the purely traditional sense, how have tribes always been managed? Who is in control? The head of the various groups has always been the chief. And what sort of a person is he likely to be?
A chief enjoys great respect as a ruler of a tribe, and among other things, he is the supreme judge within the context of tribal law. And when it comes to ritual and ceremony, he is the very central figure when it concerns the tribe as a whole. In days gone by, he was also the commander-in-chief of the army. A new chief need not necessarily be the eldest son of his deceased father. In fact, among at least one of the tribal groups, it is the late chief's eldest brother that succeeds him after death. But there is one rule that is equal to all. The new chief must be of royal blood.
The Ingonyama, or Supreme Chief of the Zulu, Zwelithini Goodwill, is eighth in line of royal rulers harking back to the mighty Shaka. His is a highly impressive lineage.
Actually, even myself, I have three names because I have Zwelithini, Goodwill, Percival. I'm the grandson of kings of Zululand.
Now, how does a chief fit into the social pattern? What does his rank really imply?
He enjoys a wealth of privileges, but as a rule has little opportunity of becoming despotic. But in any case, he has many duties to perform in the interests of his people and must set aside time regularly to discuss their problems and grievances with them, be they people of rank or be they menials. So numerous are his duties and responsibilities that a chief leans heavily on the shoulders of his tribal council, and in order to keep abreast with developments and happenings among his subjects, his domain is divided into districts and placed under supervision of sub-chiefs, and these districts are further divided and placed under the watchful eyes of headmen.
And how is contact between authority and the population maintained? What are some of the links that exist between the chief and his subjects?
The Khutla, Khoro, Olupale, Ibandla, whatever it may be called in the various languages, is a most important and essential aspect of any settlement, either large or small. It is almost sacred ground because in the Khutla there are activities which are vital to the order of a people. The Khutla, of course, plays many parts in the lives of people. It is fundamentally a gathering place, but it is also a tribal court where cases are heard and where punishment is meted out from time to time. In the case that we saw today, a man had been found guilty of adultery and had been fined. But the Khutla is also a place for friendly discussion, and it's a place where grievances can be aired without fear of reprisal. It is a place where favors may be asked and privileges bestowed. Furthermore, a Khutla is one of these places where there's total involvement of the entire population. The people can come together and they can discuss all manner of things in confidence with each other.
Social contact, communication and rulership. Some tribal rulers have commanded more power than others.
We are now in the heart of Zululand. This is the site of Dingaan's great military kraal, Mgungundlovu. But this entire area around us was once called Emakosini, which means the place of kings. And not very far into the veld, there's a grave of the original ancestor, Zulu himself. And across this way, Shaka had his first military kraal, Bulawayo. Now, Ngungundlovu was a colossal kraal. There were 1,800 military huts alone for his warriors. And there's still much to be seen of Ngungundlovu. This, for example, is one of Dingaan's original huts belonging to the Isidlodlo, or harem. Now, the reason it has been preserved like this is that although Mgungundlovu was burnt down 150 years ago, this floor burnt as hard as brick and has remained here ever since, quite intact. This is the hearth, and behind this ridge, the occupants of this hut kept their belongings. Now, sitting in this very spot many, many years ago, I heard the version, the Zulu version of the Piet Retief massacre. It was most interesting, I felt. The idea was this, that we all know that on the day before the massacre, Piet Retief and his people put on a great display of horse riding, and they were firing their guns into the air. This was an amazing thing for the Zulus to see, but it caused a lot of fear, a lot of consternation. And that night, when the Boers were camped not very far from here, the horses were walking around the palisades. And there were some people within the kraal that were saying, "Ho, you see, we know that our witches ride on hyenas. What about these whites? Are they not riding on their types of animals? And so there was this rumor that there was mpakati, in other words, witchcraft. And on the very day of the massacre, not many hours after that, we'll recall that Dingaan gave the command, "Abulale Batakati!" Kill the wizard. This is Kwamatiwane. We know it far better as Retief's Koppie, because this is where Piet Retief and his followers were put to death. It was named Matiwane because Chief Matiwane was a contemporary of Dingaan, and he and many other transgressors also met their death right here. It would seem, having heard the Zulu version, that there was a misunderstanding in this whole dreadful episode. How important it is, therefore, for us to get to know the cultures of other people better.